If you are not ready to work, hustle, kill, then please leave.
Come on, here we go.
So getting into this podcast, we have a very special guest on here talking about men's mental health. My brother, Nathaniel Taylor, who, let me pull out my list here because he's got a laundry list of titles. He's a licensed mental health counselor and executive clinical director at Forge VFR in Manchester, New Hampshire. Nathaniel is also dedicated to supporting veterans and first responders facing mental health and substance use challenges. Originally from the Midwest, Nathaniel's career has been marked by his expertise in serious mental health illnesses and the development of impactful programs for complex populations. So, AKA, he knows his shit.
Or alternatively, I just have a very poor relationship with stress. Depends on how you want to frame that.
So, just to kind of dive into this, because this is a very important topic for us to cover. Like, obviously, I want to talk about men in general that struggle with mental health, but also very specific to the people that listen to our podcast within bodybuilding and fitness. So first, I kind of want to just cover more in your professional opinion. Why do you think men struggle with mental health in general?
I mean, that's going to be the $1 million question, is fine tuning that. But I'd say a lot of men struggle with a lot of similar issues as far as emotional expression, societal values and norms that kind of go counterintuitive to having emotions. And so when we get into the idea of being strong, being brave, being macho, or whatever you want to call it, being vulnerable seems like an exact opposite of that.
Sure. Mm-hmm. How do you think that applies to men within the gym specifically? How do you think what do you think the stigma is that makes them want to be that certain way and feel like they can't be more vulnerable?
So I think when we're talking about the stigma and we're talking about the gym and we start getting kind of overlap to passion and purpose and stereotypes, if someone's in the gym, maybe they are trying to overcompensate by their own fears and inadequacies. So they have to be the largest, fastest, strongest person because it's unacceptable to be small. But then if you look at, bodybuilding and weightlifting in general, you have this mentality of passion and drive and excellence. So all these two worlds overlap, kind of looking at all in the gym at the same time. You've got different populations in the same space.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely feel that for myself too. It kind of hit me right in the gut when you said about being small. I was like, that's not me. That's not me. But it's I can totally see that with people in the gym, especially with men, where it's we tie so much value in, especially when it comes to bodybuilding and our exterior. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. We need to have that solid, impenetrable exterior shell. We can't show a soft inside. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But something I've really learned in myself lately, just from different things within my faith and stuff like that. True strength comes from gentleness in a way too. That true strength is gentle, and I think that's something that men really need to get over. Is it's not all about how big your muscles are, as cool as they are, or how much weight you lift, but it's also about what's going on internally. So I kind of wanted to ask you, what do you think is the link between body image, self-worth, and just overall mental health and bodybuilding?
So before I answer that, I'm going to flip that back to you guys. If you guys were to take a stab in the dark, Will, what is your thoughts on that question?
About the whole mental health in the gym thing.
Yeah. So you think it's kind of the link between body image, self-worth, and mental health in bodybuilding?
I mean, it comes down to, you guys kind of touched on briefly. I think it's the past. I want to say bring it back to the quote unquote childhood traumas, but it kind of comes down to that. I feel with a lot of cases I see, when it comes to buddies, I would say even maybe slightly in my own journey. But just like those past experiences where it's like maybe you go through a breakup, maybe you go through a hard a few months where maybe money's tight with your family, or maybe your parents are going through a divorce. Like I feel like that kind of sparks in a lot of guys. It's like that. All right, well, I gotta be the man in the house now. I gotta be the man in my own life, and I gotta get bigger, right? I gotta look better, and I think that's what creates a lot of those big bodybuilders. It's just it comes back down through that vulnerability as maybe a child or growing up.
Okay, no, I like that answer. What do you got, Tris?
Dude, I'm actually really happy that Will brought up like the trauma piece, because I feel like that's a really big kind of like buzzword nowadays too.
Yeah.
Where, okay, what really is trauma though? You know what I mean? Because it's like I feel like it kind of gets thrown around loosely a little bit, to where it's like this person said something that offended me and that's trauma. And it's like
Right.
not necessarily. So I guess kind of like in your professional response, what do you think really is trauma?
So trauma is going to be unique to the person that's experiencing it. One person who has more resiliency or factors built into their life may not have a trauma response to something that will traumatize another person. But again, I'm trying not to use the Webster's definition of trauma. I'm trying to get into that kind of literal sense, because you're right, we do kind of throw it around, gaslighting, narcissism, all these are these fancy words that people like to use to quantify anything. So when we talk about trauma itself, it's whether it's PTSD, it's going to be different per person. Someone who had a different childhood, who has adapted differently. You've got big T trauma and little t trauma. So things that are going to impact you in small ways and things that are going to impact you in big ways. So it's not a one size fits all. And usually what I'll find is the person who's experienced a lot of trauma often downplays the trauma they've experienced, because that's just their life. Until you start like doing some standardized screener that you're like, have you experienced this? And they're like, yeah. And this, yeah. And this, yeah. And this, and you just keep going. And you're like, you realize that most people don't answer yes to all of these questions. So it's a level of insight and where their brain is ready to accept it or not, which is a really fancy way of saying there's no gut truth to say this is what trauma is and how it's experienced, but it's a recognizing that each person's path has had different experiences.
Do you find that more apparent in men, or is it kind of equal across genders?
So again, this kind of goes back a little bit to the presentation of the trauma, whether we're willing to choose to talk about it, the vulnerability of it. When I was mentioning, I work with veterans and first responders. That's a population that deals with extreme situations consistently, and to seek support for trauma is difficult. And so if you overlap that with the societal norms that says you can't go to mental health therapy or else you're crazy, you're broken. And then also the hypermasculinity of, well, I have to be visually perfect. I have to handle it all. I got to bring home the bacon, and I have to deadlift 5,000 pounds or else I'm insignificant and weak. So I think it's really just identifying how that person has internalized it and is expressing it.
Okay. So I'm kind of curious, like from a coaching standpoint, because I work with some active members in our service and then also some veterans as well. How would you say I could learn to apply coaching them better, in a sense, for someone that has gone through very intense experiences like that?
So, I mean, the first thing you can do is name it, right? Whenever I do any sort of shows or I'm with my co-workers, I always introduce myself as a dirty civilian. So, I kind of already label it on the ground level of I'm as culturally competent as I can be right now, and I'm going to work towards that. So when you're talking about working with this population, it is getting to know your folks, being competent in who they are and their experiences. Because again, one veteran's experience is not going to be the same as the others. One deployment is not the same as another deployment. So I'm giving you kind of vague paintbrush answers here, but the point is being know your folks. because once you know them, then you can know how to motivate them and their own specific issues or insecurities.
Yeah. And I think that's like a big thing within the coaching realm, almost kind of like aside from like the mental health aspect, that I wish a lot of people would do more in coaching nowadays, is learning the actual individuals and not just collecting the paycheck, calling it good, getting, or even just like getting the result. It's, I find I get the best results from people when I actually truly give a shit about them. You know what I mean? And just truly, I guess this is really tied into mental health, because I find even with my coach, like I've had some periods pretty recently where I was kind of in the ruts, and him just reaching out, sending a text, letting him know that he was in my corner, showing that he gave a shit, dude, it helped me pull out of that mental rut so much faster. And
That's
I wish,
dope.
yeah, dude, and I wish, and you got to do it from like a genuine spot. Like, you can't just do it because like, hey, it's my job to reach out and make sure they're doing good because I'm a coach. But it's like, just be like, hey, I was thinking in my day about you. I came across this, made me think of you, and I just wanted to reach out and see like how this pertained to you. How are you doing? You know what I mean? Like something. It was super funny. He texted me. It was like, this was like his exact text me. He was like, yo, dude, I was setting up some lights for posing, just practicing, and I went to pop a pimple on my chest next to my tattoo, and it was like some John verse, and it was like, but then he went into it, I was like, have I not commanded you, you know, etc. in the verse, and pretty much saying to not show fear in the face of adversity, and like really went into like showing like, hey, we're going to be in this, we're going to get through this together. And I was like, dude, you have no idea what that text just did for me.
Yeah.
Like, here's my eyes, bro. Like,
That's dope.
I really wish more people in the world would do that more, even when they're not paying you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like me and my buddy, like Will or Sam, dude, like Sam reached out when I was kind of going through it too, and just was like, hey, dude, just wanted to check on you. And just like, dude, it's so powerful. This is kind of something I wanted to touch on here too, kind of tangent. As like men, we're talking about like men's mental health here, obviously. I think it's super important that I think men are going to be most comfortable talking to other men about the problems that are also like experiencing something similar. You know what I mean? Because no one else can understand it like another man is. You know what I mean? But it's crucial to know that the men in that circle have each other's backs, and like they can actually like be comfortable opening up to him. And the way that you can make that environment is making the first step yourself. Not waiting for someone else to check on you, in on you, but you have to be the individual that checks on them. Like,
Right.
you need to take the responsibility.
So one thing I tend to say to people is vulnerability can't be taught; it has to be shown.
Right.
So you can preach all day long. Yeah, dude, you can have emotions, you can have all these things, but you know, a brother starts tearing up in front of you and you start getting awkward and squirrely and moving away, it just reinforces the dialogue. Like, oh, don't do that. Nope.
Yeah.
You know, reaching out to check on someone. Well, why would I do that? You know, I don't want them to feel weak or insignificant, that I'm like, hey, you doing okay? Where it's like, no, that's exactly what the person needed to hear.
Yeah, and even if it's not like someone's like struggling that you're in the same side of, like sometimes even just like a hand on the shoulder. It goes a long way of being there for them. And I'm kind of curious to ask you too, because a lot of times I find men, especially men like in fitness, that ties so much identity to being strong, are the ones that really don't talk about it. So I guess it can be harder to identify these like traits of depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, things like that in these individuals. So how would you say that we can look to identify these signs in people that are really good at?
So I think the first thing you talked there is the modeling, showing that you're open to that conversation, showing that you're willing to be vulnerable enough to have that connection. Because, you know, if someone's struggling and someone doesn't ask them the question, are you doing okay? They're not going to volunteer that up, you know. But if you start off with that kind of balance of like, no, I give a shit, you know, I'm reaching out not because I'm paid, not because I'm a clinician, but because you're a human and you're worthy of being checked in on. That's a wild idea for a lot of people. So first you kind of set the stage that you're dependable, reliable, and that you were willing to support them. But when you're looking at people are skittish ask questions about mental health. And so this goes back to the whole culture and mentality of men and mental health. Ironically, we're more terrified of other men judging us, or society judging us because of our mental health. So then we bury it.
Yeah.
But everyone's collectively like, man, if someone would only start that conversation.
Mhm.
So that opens you up to a vulnerability to say, yeah, I struggle with mental health. Yeah, I struggle with depression. Yeah, I've had to deal with these things before. And to be comfortable with that conversation. And not everyone's going to dive straight in. You know, they might be like, oh, and you know, this and that might have been happening, and it's being comfortable to say, hey, yeah, you know, I get it. I can empathize. I can understand where you're coming from here. So when you're starting to look for these signs, what has changed in them? Are they normally type A and then suddenly they're type B? Are they happy-go-lucky and suddenly they're isolating? So you start looking for these transitions, but sometimes it can be a slow burn.
Mm.
You know, they're pushing people away. They're irritable. They're someone that you don't necessarily want to be around because they maybe want to be around themselves or other people. So there's this entire dome, so to say, of what you're looking out for. You know, when I'm seeing a client, I'm basing their actions on previous actions, their demeanors, their mental status. All of these go into place. I have some clients who are persistently suicidal. That while that's a risk, that's not my immediate red flag. I'm looking at something else and I'm working with them. But we know we can come back to that topic. So just having that space and capability and safety to actually say, hey, you know, I'm not doing so well is huge. And so you guys coming on here and even talking about it like this is also huge because, you know, maybe there's someone watching and listening that's like, oh, I can actually just tell someone I don't feel okay and I won't implode in that very moment. Or I can ask my buddy if they're doing okay and be prepared to follow up. Because what happens when you're like, hey, you doing it? And they're like, everything fucking sucks.
Mhm.
And suddenly you're kind of in the middle of this conversation like, oh, yeah, what do I do with this now? So
Right.
it is things like this where you're educating yourself to say, how do I respond to that? How do I sit with that? And then when is it time to say, it's time to either go to the ER or get set up with a clinician? Because there's realms of support.
Interesting. And I kind of want to ask you too, because when we were talking about like the people that listen to our podcast as bodybuilders, we are very isolated a lot of the time. And what would you kind of say to people like us that when we are isolated, not all of us really feel like, a lot of us feel like we're alone.
Mhm.
Like we don't have a person that we can maybe like rely on to reach out or something like that. Or some people feel like they are literally alone in this journey. How would you say they can go about dealing with these kind of things and getting out of these mental ruts when they don't really have anyone to lean on?
So I'd say let's start off by normalizing therapy. You know, people tend to think they have to be 9 out of 10 to go see a therapist. People should start seeing a therapist when they're at 2 out of 10, so that when they hit that 9 out of 10, they have a baseline, that someone that can support them. When you're seeking out therapy, you don't have to have these wild, crazy things going on in your life to actually look for support. Sometimes it's like, hey, I'm in a field that's very isolating and I need to make sure I have support. So I'm going to get engaged in this relationship because this path of bodybuilding is stressful. It's tearing on the hormones. It's lonely at times. It's eating the 5th bucket of rice in a hotel room. You know, it's all of these things. But between like virtual therapists, the capability to do these things, that is an option. And I say that from a point of privilege, right? Saying, hey, yeah, everyone can afford a therapist. But when we're talking about prioritizing our mental health in the same way we prioritize our physical health, some sliding scale fees, depending on your insurance, can be from $50 to $100 a session. So I'd ask you, how much do you spend on supplements every month to be in prime condition?
Yeah,
Exactly.
I see it so many times where, you know, people will be hesitant to like hire a coach or invest money into themselves, but then they're like spending $500 worth of supplements. And it's just like, bro, all those things are doing like 0.001%.
Exactly.
it's like we got to have our priorities here, kind of like you
Right.
said.
Right.
I guess kind of like in your opinion, I'm kind of curious because what does like effective therapy really look like? And do you think in person is king over virtual? How does that kind of work?
So the in-person or the virtual debate is, constant. For me, I look at that as reducing barriers. And if you can't make it into the office, you can at least have a virtual session. I am a tactile person. I like to sit with them. I like to, me as a person, if I go to a therapist, I want to see them as well. I'm also a very anxious person, so I'm chronically assessing everything all the time. So I prefer in person, but I've also utilized virtual sessions for people who live in rural areas or that were traveling or their work allotted them 1 hour to step out of the building to jump on a session in their car and then come back to work. So when we talk about removing barriers, virtual is fantastic at that. My person is in person. That's my preference, but that doesn't mean that that is the preference.
Do you typically do you do like virtual sessions too with people or only in person? You do both?
No, I do both.
Okay. Do you find better results from virtual or in person with clients? Because I see like on one side virtual, like I'm sure you're familiar with BetterHelp.
Mhm.
That's something that gets like advertised a lot on podcasts like I listen to and I was kind of like checking it out the other day where it's like you can almost ask all the right questions to get like the ideal match. So like, do you find best results from getting with clients that are like your ideal match or in person where you can be more hands-on and technical?
So really that just comes down to the relationship I have with the person. If I don't jive with the client and they don't jive with me, I could have the fanciest office set up with the most high dollar tech and we're going to get nowhere. And that's when you say, what is effective therapy? It starts with that relationship. If you're with someone that you're like, I don't think I connect, and you're not using that as an excuse or a barrier, oh, this didn't work out in the first 10 seconds. So obviously therapy is not for me. And when you have a genuine relationship, having a check-in virtual session is huge. I do prefer to have a few sessions in person to just kind of get a collective vibe for both of us. But again, if my client said, hey, I can only do virtual, then I'm excited that they're saying, hey, I still want to meet with you virtually. So as far as results, that's dependent on the relationship and the effort being put in.
Interesting. Will, have you ever done any therapy before?
I have not.
I've only done maybe like I think I've only done like in-person sessions ever. And it was like both with a different person because I was totally that person that was like, well, I don't vibe first time, not for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I also just like the same thing too, where it's like, man, I'm paying like it's almost like $100 something like that per session or more in person.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where I can see like the benefit of virtual, where it is a little bit less.
Yeah. I think both my adopted siblings did therapy, and my brother's going back into therapy just because I think that's my parents are trying to figure out like a better way because we know he has like ADHD, but we haven't like actually got it diagnosed. And we're trying to do more of like a holistic route instead of just giving him like the drugs, right? Like I see so many people and so many kids these days get the drugs, and I think it's just I'm more on the holistic side of like just not having to prescribe them if they're not actually needed. So we're just gonna go through that way for him, and I think it's gonna help him a lot too because especially with he actually does have childhood trauma because of he had like some abusive parents and things like that before our family, but yeah, like I can definitely see like the benefit of like he's improved like a lot.
That's awesome.
Well, and again, it's not usually something people are super excited to go do.
Exactly.
Telling someone to go sit in a room and talk about their the dark scary box that is therapy. Well, they're going to dissect my childhood. They're going
to and I think the way my parents are phrasing it is not even like they're not even phrasing it as therapy for him.
Yeah.
They're just kind of like this is one of our family friends or something like that.
Yeah.
And then like they kind of just it makes it a little bit easier for him.
I was working with a guy and I used the comparison that I'm a brain mechanic.
I like that.
He immediately was kind of like, all right, so you're not my therapist, you're my brain mechanic. And I was like, yeah. He's like, I can accept that. So like there does need to be a level of rapport and understanding. And some people, they love going to therapy. They're like, yeah, that's my therapist. You know, I'll see some clients
Yeah.
in the street and they're like, yeah, that's my therapist. And there's some that like will blatantly avoid making eye contact with me in public because they're like, nope, not ready for that yet. This is not something I'm willing to express.
Yeah.
But
I think
again,
it's
it
cool.
goes back to normalizing it.
I think it's cool, like the way you phrase it, like differently for maybe like different people. Like if you have more of like a like veteran, like gearhead kind of guy, like they're gonna benefit from hearing like brain mechanic versus a therapist. Where it's kind of like, you know, like Will and I, like bodybuilding. Like I almost cringe when someone says bulking, when it's like dog, it's an improvement phase or growth phase. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like bulking is like when you're getting fat and you're eating like shit. Growth phase is when you're doing it right. Like that's just like, or like a cheat meal versus a free meal. Like
Yeah.
there's words for
Right.
specific things, even though like they could be technically looked at the same, but they imply different things where it could be totally different meanings for different people. So like I really like that.
Well, and that's part of that relationship is getting to know the people you're working with. And I'd like to say that's only one client that I've had to say that to, but it's not. You know, I've had some clients who sit in my office and stare at me and go, "You realize I fucking hate coming here, right?" I'm like, I know. So why are you here? And they're like, "Because I know it's necessary." I'm like, okay, well, I can work with that. So it is part of the relationship. And look, anyone can be a therapist if they can pass a test, but not everyone can be a therapist. When you try to find the correct good one that's willing to work with you and develop that relationship, that is key. And so I always tell people to shop around. Obviously, it's not going to be a 10 seconds in, you're immediately vibing, but there is a certain level of connection. There's different modalities, there's different styles of therapy. So one person may be leaning heavily into one specific type that just doesn't fit with you. You know, we talk about the different bodybuilding techniques and styles. You were telling me the other day about, what was it, your the new one you were just making for someone. Lost, it's kind of my mind. But the same thing, you'll have some clients that respond really well to heavy, and some that respond well to light, some that respond to different techniques and styles. Same way with therapy. They use different styles and techniques. So one therapist doesn't fully enclose what every therapist is going to do.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like my last question on therapy, and I kind of want to caveat onto a different subject. But how many sessions do you think it takes within therapy to become like actually effective therapy?
So that can be, it depends on what your goals are. You know, if a client's coming to me with suicidal ideation and they are confident that they won't live for another 7 days, and when they end the session they go, you know what, I think I can live 14, that is huge. Versus someone who comes in, and I'm not trying to compare stories here, but if someone has general anxiety and is trying to get some just kind of maintenance, I need some coping skills, I need some support, I'm looking for a kind of a maintenance level, it's going to be unique to each person. Now, I'm going to flip that back to bodybuilding. If I looked at you and said, Tristan, I want a 6-pack, how often, how long will it take for the average person to get a 6-pack? You'd be like, okay, well, what's your metabolism? What's your activity level? Have you been there before? Have you, what does this look like? Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with therapy. We have to take into account that person's needs, unique history, and their goals, and the acuity.
Sure. Interesting. Kind of move on here. I want to kind of give the listeners like actual practical tips that they can implement within their lives to help manage stress, anxiety, depression, like especially stress, like even for athletes that aren't maybe struggling with, you know, like suicidal ideations or anxiety, depression, you know, awesome for them. But I think stress is something that is going to be in all of our lives, and maybe not like depression, but I think everyone gets depressed, you know what I mean, at times, or they get anxious at times. So it's like, what are some like actual practical tools, tips that they can use to help manage those times?
So one thing obviously is connecting with people. And the tricky part about mental health, right, is it's isolating. And it tells you, you know, you should be lonely, you should be alone. So you kind of have this narrative in your brain that says, don't talk to other people, don't be a burden, don't do these things. And so I usually tell people, do stuff in spite of your mental health. You know, we talk about going for a walk outside. If someone is experiencing extreme major depression, the idea of leaving the bed, leaving the couch, is me walking to the gym and trying to bench press 405 right now. It sounds like a freaking impossible task.
Mm-hmm.
But if I go to the gym and I start working through it and I get worked up to it, and I've never hit 405 in my life, let's make that caveat, but I will slowly get there.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of it is acting as if that is your intention. My goal is not to cure the mood I'm in. My goal is to develop healthy things that I can do throughout my day. So obviously the generics, the good sleep, the good nutrition, the connections, limit your screen time, limit your caffeine intake, which I know I'm going to get yelled at for that one from this community, but you know, it's got to be said. So when we're looking at things that we can do, basics, you know, are we connecting with people? Have we outreach someone, you know, says, oh, I don't have time. I don't have time for these things. You do. You know, you stare at the rice cooker and you're waiting for it to cook and you're waiting for it to cook. That's 3 messages you could have shot off to someone. How you doing? How's your day? What's the weather like? Holy crap. Whenever you call me, the first thing I try to do is put on my headphones and start walking around outside. Then I can dual task it. So when we talk about meditation, mindfulness, it's also engaging in things. When we're talking about terms that have been abused, the word self-care.
Yeah.
So you would say like just kind of creating systems of habits for self-care.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I like that.
So let me ask you guys this first. Well, how would you define self-care?
Well, I think I would break it into maybe a couple different like subcategories. I mean, hygiene being one of them.
A fat pump. I'm sure.
I think, yeah. I mean, I would say like hygiene being one of them. I think maybe time, you know, doing the things that you love, that are kind of maybe more sedentary. So maybe reading, maybe going on a walk, maybe watching, maybe a show with a friend of yours, maybe, will be another example. You get the idea for that part, and then maybe going, and then on the other side, the last one would probably be like the physical aspect. So like the gym, you know, cardio, and just and paying attention to food and diet. So I think that would kind of break in like my all different kind of categories of self-care. I don't know if Tristan, you'd have a different outlook on that.
Yeah, so a lot of the listeners know, I know we kind of talked on this last episode, so I don't want to like dive super deep into it, but a lot of them know that I'm kind of going through a period of my life where my mental health is challenged just through the health issues with my heart, stuff like that. I've kind of already talked a little bit about it on it, but I went through a period where, you know, I was really struggling, and I kind of felt myself starting to fall into that spiral where, you know, my screen time was going up. My eating habits were what they should have been. When I first got told the news I had, I pretty much, like, I felt like in shock, almost like I just didn't know what to do with myself. But as I kind of like was going into it, I was like, actually, I had a call with one of my athletes, and she's struggling with POTS, and she's been having a lot of issues. Like she can whenever she goes to the gym, she doesn't know, she may or not pass out, like when she's lifting. That's scary as shit. And I was having this conversation with her on a call, and she's like, but I'm still going to keep going because I'm not going to let this run my life. And I was like, damn, you're so fucking right. It's like, respect. I can't let this run my life. And that's the same thing for feeling depressed or anxious. It's like, you can't let it you can't give it the power to run your life. I think it's totally normal and it's totally okay to be depressed and be anxious, but it's not okay to let it take over and just submit to it. So things I tried to do.
Can I add a caveat to that real quick though?
Let me go through it because I may.
Okay, perfect. Go ahead.
Because when I was going through it, I think it's important. like within bodybuilders, gym goers, to not mask the things that we are going through. Because a lot of us will mask it with like going to the gym or whatever else gym people do outside of the gym. I don't know.
That's an answer in of itself.
Yeah, right. But that's like whenever I think of how bodybuilders, fitness people deal with these things, it's usually the gym.
Mhm.
And that's been true for me for so long. And that's what the hardest thing about this was, is because they pretty much told me, hey, you gotta not train.
Mhm.
That, like, fuck, that's my one coping mechanism. So it's like, how am I gonna manage this? So what I took this as is this is an opportunity for me to develop other areas so that when I get over this, I'm going to be 10 times the bodybuilder I was before. So what did that look like for me in terms of, like, you can maybe call it coping, but I just call it more growth, is more reading, more walks in nature, more meditation, more talks with my family, and more time with my friends. Doing those little things I just haven't really been able to do. And that's really leading a lot more into my faith has been massive right now.
Mhm.
And that's really helped pull me out of this rut, is showing me that there's still so much that can be accomplished right now.
Right.
That life isn't on e-brake. Like, it's still on the pedal, it's just not on the pedal in training right now.
Right.
So
So the caveat I want to throw out there, because I don't know if you intentionally, sorry, I don't know if you caught what you said. You had said, but it's not okay to become consumed by your mental health. What I want to point out is that's a shame-based statement. So someone who has been consumed by the mental health, you talk to the bodybuilder who has now eaten a little too many containers of ice cream.
Mhm.
And they're going, wow, I fucking blew it. Here I am. I succumbed to it. I'm supposed to have willpower. I'm supposed to be strong. I guess I'm done.
Mm.
When we talk about mental health, we're talking about the capability to come back. If you put me in the gym today and decide to throw 1,000 pounds on the squat bar, it's gonna crush me. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And if you decided to offload the weight onto me as I'm walking by you, it's going to crush me. And sometimes mental health is like that, right? You didn't wake up going, oh, I might have this medical condition going on, and it might floor me this afternoon. You just got floored. And so mental health doesn't mind its own pace. It just kind of comes in. And so when we're talking about people outreach and people speaking, when we need to reach our hand out is when people have fallen, when they are in the midst of it, and say, I get it. You're carrying an immense burden right now. Everything is bleak. Everything is terrible. And my goal is not to tell you to turn on the light. My goal is to sit in the darkness with you.
Mhm.
You're allowed to be you right now. You can still overcome this, and I'll be here to help you in this process. And I think that's the cap, because everything you were saying was absolutely spot on. But I think that's the spot where people start to mask, where they start to isolate, is when they are noticing they're feeling helpless and worthless. Well, why would I talk to someone? Who cares? I'm already in this pit. They're already enraptured in their own brain. That's when we want people to reach out the most, because that's the point where they have to feel safe to say, what in fuck's name is going on inside my brain? I thought I was stronger than this. I thought I was more capable than this. And everything's gone to shit.
Hmm.
And I think that's what you're getting at, but I just wanted to make sure that verbiage was clear, because when we talk about men's health, we talk about you being an authority figure, me being an authority figure. Everything you say, everything you put on to this podcast becomes gospel.
Mhm.
So, and this is me speaking as a mental health professional, because I'm part of my training is to listen for specific words, nuances, and patterns.
Mm.
And so I'm not trying to point this out to put you on blast, because again, what you're saying was absolutely fantastic. But it's to create that space where men are allowed to have their downs. Men are allowed to feel anxious. Men are allowed to feel weak. Men are allowed to feel defeated. But our community is here for each other. And so not only do we have to have the strength to reach out, but we have to have the strength to accept the support.
I like that. The one thing I kind of to bring up with you on that is, what's like the best way to bring up these kind of situations with a like significant other? Like, I don't have a significant other. Will doesn't either, but for the people that are listening that maybe do, how would you recommend them going about it?
So, it depends on the stage you're in, right? If you're in chaos phase, critical, acute phase, starting softly. If you are the one experiencing it, right? Starting off with, depending on the dynamic, I'm not looking for you to solve this, but I want you to be aware of what's going on in my brain. I've also heard I'm not handing you my problem. The goal is to put this in the room with us so we can both talk about it. Because when you talk about being the man of the house, then now you're gonna have to swallow a lot of pride and shame to tell the person that you feel like you're fully responsible for taking care of, hey, I'm struggling, I need help.
I think that's almost a harder kind of fight to fight as a man, is being like, you always want to be that rock for those around you, but especially for the person you love. Because I feel like there's so many people on social media, I don't know if you see this a lot, Will, but they always preach how never open up your emotions to your significant other. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
I just think that in my opinion, being vulnerable with your partner in the correct way, like you said, where you're not just offloading your garbage onto him, it can make that relationship stronger.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that true, whenever you deal with these, with your significant other, because you're married?
Oh yeah, no, I'm in pretty consistent conversation with my spouse about my own mental health. If I'm not doing well, I bring it up. And again, my goal is, through my own counseling, my own coping skills, is to not use it as a stopping point, but more as an understanding point. That, hey, maybe my depression is a little bit heavier today, and I'm going to probably need a little bit more grace when I'm trying to remember things, because that means my executive functioning is toast. So it's not that I'm not listening. It's not that I'm not trying to be present. It's just that my brain is absolutely trying to override where I am right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so having that conversation of how can I support, how can I help, this also goes fully back to the willing to seek outside help too. Your support system, your community is vital. Your spouse, they're there 24/7. Your family and friends, also there. Your coworkers, also part of your community. And the nice thing, and I'm going to go back to it because that's what I'm preaching about right now, is having a therapist. And again, it doesn't have to be someone you see once a week, every other day, whatever. Having someone you can come back to as a third party. Hey, I feel like I'm burdening my family with what I'm talking about. Oh, excellent. Well, let's talk about that. So utilizing your supports in different ways is key, and staying in communication is also key. But it is up to you to do something about it. People are not in charge of your responses and reactions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if the longer you hold it in too, Will, I'm sure you've kind of heard this as well, is the longer that you kind of hold something in and you just don't deal with it, the worse it's just going to get. So it's I know for things I've dealt with, it's I almost just pretend like it doesn't exist and it'll just go away on its own.
And that's not the case.
It's not the case. You got to deal with it. And the sooner you just be real with yourself and address it, the better the outcome is going to be, instead of letting it pile up and pile up and pile up.
Yeah. I always describe it as credit card debt.
Yeah, that's good.
You keep kind of ignoring it. You don't open the envelope, and then one day you finally open it and you're like, oh shit, I'm bankrupt. Oh God. But if you did spend some time, and again, this isn't a shame to those that wait that long, but this is that statement of early prevention is key. Getting in to get some work done is key.
Stay the analogy another way for bodybuilders, get your blood work done.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if we could flex our brain, just take off our cap and be like, look how muscular my brain is because all the self-compassion I give myself, I think we would see a different trend, because then we could make our brain into an ego statement. But I can't do a double bicep flex with my two lobes. Like that's just unheard of. It's just not something you can do. So going all the way back to what you said at the very beginning, right? Being gentle, having the capability to weave back and forth, be masculine, and have confidence in what you would consider not masculine. And I use huge air quotes around that because our society defines what is masculine.
Mhm. Interesting. How would you say is like, when you think of, I'm sure you kind of deal with a lot of, you're probably pretty familiar with like the toxic masculinity,
Mhm.
regularity. Is that something like, I think there is such thing as toxic masculinity, but in my opinion, it's not maybe as bad as the picture as it's painted. Because like a lot of times people will almost see us like as bodybuilders like that, like whenever we train hard, that it's like toxic masculinity, which in my opinion, it's not. But what do you think, like in your definition, is toxic masculinity, where it's like more just ego and not actual masculinity?
So I think you hit the key word there is ego. I think people are assholes and go, yeah, it's because I'm a dude. Of course I'm angry. It's because I'm a fucking dude. You know, oh, you just want me to be more feminine. You know, you want me to have more feelings. That's toxic masculinity, right? You being a coach in the gym, going balls to the wall and full steam ahead, hooting and hollering and getting into your testosterone. When you're not subjugating someone, pushing someone else down, telling someone else they're a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be cautious how I say this. You know, using your innate privilege, essentially from being a male. And I'm opening up a bunch of cans of worms on your podcast by saying toxic masculinity and privilege and all these things. But my favorite comparison was, this might be an age difference. The movie Tarzan.
Oh yeah.
Will, are you familiar?
Yeah, I've seen the movie.
Okay.
You talking like
So-
the realistic VCR or like the Disney?
Nope, the old Disney one.
Yeah.
One metaphor I had heard is both Tarzan and Clayton, the poacher, they're both forms of masculinity. Tarzan is clearly strong. He doesn't have to profess his strength. He doesn't have to be a douchebag about his strength. Well, Clayton is kind of the definition of toxic masculinity. He's got his gun because he's got to compensate in other areas. So when we talk about toxic masculinity, it's not an attack on men. It's an attack on men who don't give a shit about other people and use that to their advantage.
Or have the high egos.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because toxic masculinity is kind of something I just wanted to cherry on top talk about within men's mental health. Because kind of like you said, I think it is something that's masking something deeper within. And I think being able to have like the self-evaluation like of that is going to be really, really big. Like maybe ask yourself if you are having those kind of like traits that like check yourself, or have those people like around you to check yourself of, are you starting to show those? Because like I was kind of saying, I think true strength is gentle, and kind of like something I've been trying to show more of that side of me. Like if I'm being really honest, when I was first kind of getting into coaching and like Instagram, I was kind of starting to have a little bit of toxic masculinity, if I was honest, because my entire brand is called Savage Excellence, and I almost felt like in myself that like I have to be that alpha savage dude that doesn't give a fuck, and people are like, damn, you know, like he's a savage. But it's like, who am I trying to prove this to?
Right.
I know I look good. I know my shit. Like no one's gonna take that away from me. You know what I mean? And I've been kind of showing more of, you got to just be your authentic self, and you can't.
Yeah, that's literally what I was about to say.
Yeah.
Can't try to be someone you're not. I literally just heard this quote the other day of, whenever you try to be someone else, you're going to be second at best. And that resonates really, really hard with me. Is, why am I trying to be someone that I'm not? Because I like their style, but I'm never going to be able to match their style because
Right.
that's their style. And I'm only going to be second at best, and I hate being second. So why not lean into who I am so I can be number one? You know what I mean? And people are gonna feel that energy too, of like you're being authentic. So something I've been like doing more where I would not have done this a few months ago, where I was just going for a walk, and dude, I love picking flowers on my walks in the summer. Like I'll just smell them as I walk around, and I throw them in like in a little vase in my kitchen, where it's like I don't give two shits because I'm confident in my masculinity. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Where it's like strength is gentle.
Mhm.
It's like that's the kind of energy where it's like I don't give a fuck that I like.
Right. And
Yeah.
when you're talking about true strength, it's the vulnerability to say that,
Mhm.
knowing that someone can come after you. Oh, you flower picking, blah, 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 blah. Well, dude, how's your anger problems? What are you doing with your life?
You're small.
Well, that's awfully bold words from someone that short.
Maybe I'm
It's,
too close.
but I mean, we're joking about it, but toxic masculinity is the rules that tell you can't go to therapy, that you can't share your emotions.
Right.
That's what that is. Because you're a dude, you can't do this. Okay. You can't wait for your child to learn how to mask their own emotions and not talk to anyone about it and develop drinking problems. You know, it's a cycle, and people don't like to approach themselves and be vulnerable. So instead of me facing the fact that maybe I do like to pick flowers and I do like the view of nice flowers on my table, I've got to come to terms with a lot of things about myself. So it's going to be easier to just ridicule you for it
Yeah.
and call you less of a person.
Well, this is honestly, I think this is a big reason why mental health, toxic masculinity, like everything we've talked about, we've kind of talked about on this, but this is why I'm a big believer that God needs to be number one.
Yeah.
Because I think, in my opinion, God is the true example of masculinity. Because it's all out of love and compassion, and it's all out of true strength. And I
True
think,
strength is shown by humility.
yeah. And I think he's the ultimate example. And the more I've leaned into my faith, the more like I learn what that looks like, and the more I feel it like in my soul of like, okay, this is what real masculinity feels like. And it's a very empowering feeling. I'm not saying like everyone's got to believe in what I believe in, but I think if you don't know where to start, or if you feel like that, like that's a great place to like turn to. And it's just something that's helped me. But I think just having something where you have something that's above you to humble you is very powerful.
And I'd say, kind of building on that, those male friendships, it's
Yeah.
on us to raise the bar for each other. Us standing idly by and allowing other people to talk shit about mental health or things like that just perpetuates the same message. So when we talk male friendships, it's key because we're modeling the behavior.
Mhm.
We are showcasing what should be more acceptable and what shouldn't be. So when we're defining those standards, don't put up with shit. You know,
Mhm.
if you're looking at it that way, if someone is demeaning to someone and trying to pull a power move, hey, why are you doing that?
Mhm.
Oh, you know, da 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 da. Okay, but tell me why. And it goes back to asking the question: how you doing? Sound like a lot of anger. Where's that coming from?
Mm.
Because once you start opening those questions up, people tend to not be able to stop, but also comes out of their mouth.
Mhm. In your like professional opinion, what do you think? Because something that like Will and I talk about a lot is we need to have a circle where we are all like in a position where we're okay with checking each other. Like,
Yeah.
I really try to encourage Will. Like, if I'm fucking up, I want him to call me out of my shit. And if he's fucking up, I'm going to call him out on his shit. What do you think is like the best way to approach just like whether it's like with your homie or your significant other, family member, when it comes to like confrontation, to do it in like a healthy way that doesn't like offend them? Which someone might be offended to some degree, but like that's just kind of part of it. But how do you do it like in the most respectful way to get the ideal response.
So you're never going to be able to control someone's response, right?
Right.
But we can prep ourselves to be cool and level-headed, and to not come in with a like shame-based narrative, right? You know, it's being able to come in and be like, if I saw you doing something a little sketchy, I might come up to you and be like, hey, Tris, can you tell me more about, you know, what just happened there? Oh yeah, da 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 da. Oh, that's interesting. How did you come to that conclusion? I'm not trying to attack you. I'm genuinely curious. And you might throw something, again, vulnerability has to be seen. And, you know, I've dealt and struggled with some of the same thoughts. And so I'm curious about how you're handling them. And I'd like to compare them to how I'm handling them. And so it opens this door that says, I'm not attacking you, but we need to have accountability. We can have accountability and compassion at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I get why you're acting that way. I get that there's traumas. I get that there's things. However, let's talk about how we can be better.
Yeah.
How can we grow together? Please check me out. I know my insecurities. I'm an anxious person. So I'm going to do A, B, and C. And I'd love for you to support me in my growth in that. What can I do to support you?
Yeah, that's awesome. I think a simple statement I like to use a lot whenever I'm trying to come from a place of like, I genuinely like want to help them, not put them below me, is like, yo, dude, I'm telling you this because I love you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, say first. And I just tied this in again with like men's mental health, because I think it's really important that you have that kind of circle, like ironclad circle, where everyone's on equal footing and like able, like there's not really, I don't like groups where there's an alpha in the group. I like groups where we're all brothers on equal footing and we're all on the same like wavelength of like I said, like to check each other. And I think that's like a really easy, simple way for like anyone that's listening. Like if you have those kind of same people in your circle that you want to like make sure we're staying humble or just doing the right thing in general, just a simple statement you can say is like, I'm going to tell you this because I love you, and then go into it.
I was curious also, do you think like, I would imagine like knowing the person and how they might potentially react as well might help with adjusting your response to them.
Obviously there's knowledge into knowing the person. Like if they're prone to shame, if they're prone to shutting down, you're going to know you're needing a little bit more lighter touch with it. But when you own your own delivery properly, that's the key. Is, am I stating this in a way that, you know, Tristan said, you know, no one's better than anyone else. Is this still horizontal relationship?
Yeah.
Am I coming at this as a critique because I do better than you? Or am I saying we're both good people, we're both on the same plane, and I want to talk to you about this?
I like that.
Because and that's, once you tip that scale to I'm okay, you're not okay, they feel it. Or the verse, I'm not okay and you're okay. That's people that are like, tell me how to live my life. But if you can get everyone to stay at the I'm okay, you're okay mentality.
Yeah.
Hey man, I'm not saying you're broken. I'm not saying I'm perfect. So how can we talk about this?
Yeah. I think a great one too is like, hey, I want to bring this up to you because I've struggled with this too in the past.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
It builds relatability.
Yeah.
Relatability, vulnerability. And it's that genuine authenticness. You can't just be like, oh yeah, I struggled that when I was 2 and like move on. Like each person's path is different. Each person's response is different, but being genuinely interested in giving a shit is key.
I mean, coming in on it without an ego.
Yeah. I love that, man. We are kind of closing in on an hour. Is there anything else, Will, you want to ask, or Nathaniel, you want to touch on? Don't jump at the bit.
Did you go through all your questions, Tristan?
Yeah, actually, we went through everything and more. So I think this was really good. I think we gave a lot of very valuable information for people to take from. Nathaniel, anything you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say this is just the tip of the well, the tip of the iceberg. Obviously, me talking here doesn't constitute like a therapist-client relationship, but it's hoping. I'm hoping it opens the door to people going, oh, that dude was a therapist. I mean, yeah, he was tall, widow-peaked looking dude with a cardigan. So that's kind of what I thought. But the goal is to kind of see that I'm not sitting here with my Freud pipe, leaning back and telling me, how does that make you feel? Like, the therapy is going to be unique for each person. And you don't know what that's going to be like until you attempt it. And even if you attempt it and it wasn't for you, find a different person. You didn't date just one person and then be like, well, that was it for me.
Yeah.
That was cool. There's no one else like this.
And something you felt like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, don't let man-made barriers be your barrier to being the best you possible.
Yeah, I was actually perfect that you said that, because kind of like you said with therapy is anyone that's listening, like, just because you aren't suicidal or struggling mentally, like, you can still seek a therapist. Just with, like, hey, everyone that's a bodybuilder that I know is obsessed with personal growth. Like, you can get a therapist, even if you're at the best mental health you've ever had, to make it even better and still address the things that maybe are holding you back. I know, like, Phil Heath was a big guy on therapy, he leaned into a lot, and he's like one of the best champions in the world.
Right.
So therapy's been something I've been looking at, even not just for, like, kind of like you said, in times that you feel like you're struggling, but just to learn about yourself.
Yeah, because it's hard to look inwardly. There's only a certain extent you can look inwardly upon yourself.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need that external factor.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I had a question. I guess I was kind of curious, like, going back to kind of like relating therapy and bodybuilding. If we could, I don't want to take too much time in here to talk about this, but if you could create maybe almost like a improvement plan of like how you could see like therapy like benefiting a bodybuilder who maybe like he like struggles with, maybe he's working a 9-to-5 job and he's getting his meals in, he's having pretty decent training sessions, but he's just kind of feeling alone. Like maybe he has like one or two friends from high school that maybe they hang out once in a while, but I guess like in that like I guess situation, what would you maybe like suggest to build upon like that lifestyle, like lifestyle things as well as maybe things with friends or in therapy, like how, like some things that you maybe put together to kind of create more of a full circle and a better person eventually.
So I would highlight, you're physically at your best when you're mentally at your best. And so when we're talking about this, even that beginning phase, going to a therapist to help figure out what's your barrier. Are you doing this because you're angry, or are you doing this because you want to do this? When we start looking at our motivation and we start removing those mental barriers and blocks, you may find that once those blocks are done, you get to enjoy what you're doing twice as much because you're mindfully aware of what you're doing. Talk about that mind-body connection. If you are sitting there lost in your thoughts every workout, anxiety, depression, anger, and you're basically using the workout as a maladaptive coping skill to give you a trickle of dopamine, it's not going to have the same push. But when you're mentally healthy and you're able to reframe these things, and that's where the beauty of the therapist comes in, is they help you to kind of balance. And like you said, you can only introspect so much, self-actualize so much, because you're clouded by your own perspective. You don't know what you know until you know what you don't know.
Right. That's why your why is so important.
Right. Yeah. And getting behind that, because that'll get you through the ruts. And your community, whether it's one person, two people, staying connected and staying true to those values of who you want to connect with is also key. You don't need 3 million acquaintances.
Right.
And that goes back to what is healthy for you. 3 guys that you can hang out with. Awesome. Are you feeling lonely because the world? I don't know if you guys have opened the news recently, but it's heavy. And so I would say to the people out there who feel like they can't identify anything that would make them depressed. I didn't have trauma. I didn't have this. I had a great upbringing. That means something, but it doesn't mean anything. And just because you're feeling off or down or anxious or lonely, it doesn't mean you're broken. It just means you're a human, and that there's something that needs to oiled differently or looked at in a different light.
Mhm.
I would say too, like at the end of the day, if you are struggling, like you need to be the one to take action. Because I feel like almost sometimes I feel like some people will almost like purposely get depressed and anxious so that they can like look for attention or external
Mhm.
kind of like
So
acknowledgments.
there's a term called individual psychology, and it's an Adlerian type that says we live lifestyles. That the lifestyle we live, and I don't speak for everyone who practices this. I practice the different modalities. Um, that our lifestyle accomplishes a goal. So if I, the best example is someone who goes, I could run my own business and I'd be profitable and I'd show these hooligans what good business looks like, but then they never open their business. So
Mhm.
they have never failed because they've never attempted. So that's their lifestyle, that's their goal. So they're never going to attempt to open a business because
Mhm.
that story aligns with their goal, their false narrative. So some people, when we talk about living as if, and I'm being cautious about how I say this because this is a very blanket statement, I might have a false narrative that my anxiety keeps me safe. So then I'm going to self isolate because then if I self isolate, I'm never in a situation that I have to be vulnerable.
Mhm.
So I'm
Mhm.
not going to work on my anxiety because if I did that, then I'd be the person that has to be vulnerable. And so I always encourage people, I shouldn't say always, I encourage people to act as if, well, I'm really anxious and I can't do that. What would be different if you weren't anxious? Well, I'd be able to talk to people. Well, how about you act as if you could? Go try that out. Well, I'm really depressed. If I wasn't depressed, I'd be able to go to the gym. Well, why don't you go to the gym and act as if you weren't? And so when you're talking about lifestyles, that's actually a full style and modality of therapy is what is this lifestyle, whether good or negative, benefiting you, and whether that's good or negative.
Mm.
That's good. Yeah, I feel like that's something I've seen a lot that almost like irks me is people will like, I feel like over the years, depression or mental health has almost become like a trend. Like it's become like,
Yeah.
and I don't know, it's just like, where do you think like that comes from? Is this just like kind of like you were saying, like,
I think it's becoming, well, it's becoming more mainstream. Like
yeah,
we're talking about it more, we're getting more accepting of it. And so we've gone the shift from, it's this weird thing. I'm thinking about Arnold. Like he brought in this bodybuilding trend to America. Everyone was like, big biceps? Who wants that?
hmm
And then suddenly it kind of imploded into a thing. And now we have like the fitness influencers who
hmm
are only doing it for the Instagram likes and the people that are doing it because they're passion.
mm
When we look at mental health, it's now popular. We're in these verbiages and terms that we haven't quite figured out yet. What does every Men's Health magazine say? How to get 6 packs in 6 weeks, how to get quick fixes.
Yeah. You can't
Mental
just take
health.
the miracle pill.
Right. But that's the same exact thing for mental health.
Mhm.
People are looking for mental fixes. How do I get out of this rut tomorrow? Sorry, it's not
Do
going
you
to
think? Do
happen.
you think that's actually why? Do you think that's why? You know, the pharmaceutical industry might prescribe certain drugs as like maybe quick fixes to
Oh
certain
yeah,
mental
we
conditions.
we love quick fixes.
hmm
Our culture is Amazon 2 day shipping, and if it's here in 2.5, I'm pissed.
hmm
Yeah.
So, and this is not to go. So, like, if you need a mental health medication to help stabilize, absolutely. I'm not saying don't use medication,
Right.
um, but do your process first.
Yeah.
Your medication increasing serotonin isn't going to change the way you view yourself. Only
Right.
you're going to do that. It might help alleviate your depressive symptoms so that you can actually go, wait, am I not a shitbag? And actually have some time to like
Right.
connect with yourself.
Doing the
Um,
meat. Doing the meat and
right,
potatoes first before you add in the seasonings.
right, absolutely. So,
Okay.
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was just gonna say, how much depression cases do you think are like I'm talking like statistically, maybe across like even the globe right now, are linked to just screen time?
Oh God, I don't have a number for that, but I would say a gross amount. Um, you think about algorithms and how fine-tuned that have become. You look at TikTok, you look at Instagram, you look at Facebook Reels, all these things, they're feeding us what we're paying attention to. Your algorithm is built on you. And so the more depressing things you like and spend time with, the more it feeds you.
Mhm.
The more you look at travel videos, the more travel videos it shows you. And if that feeds you negatively, my friends are out here doing things and here I am at home.
Mm.
It doesn't feed you the fact that this is their only trip they took this year, that they're $20,000 in debt, and they're angry at the world. Social media creates a very false image of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's super key. And Will and I have touched on this a little bit. The screen time is, I notice for myself, my mental health significantly goes down the drain the more I'm on. And I think like for listeners, like that's like an issue for you, which if you're saying it's not, I don't believe you. But
It's true for all of us.
yeah, I'd really highly recommend setting like a timer on your like social media usage, just something kind of to help you break that cycle of maybe like doom scrolling. Just kind of a reminder of like, I've been on this for too long, I need to move on, can be very beneficial. And like Will and I've kind of touched on this too, but starting your morning, kind of like you said, with like a walk or something like that, but not going on your phone right away, is something that I think helps me significantly, but would help a lot more people. Is you just either one, just keep your phone out of your room when it like your alarm goes off. Kind of like a system I like to have is, I don't know, not everyone has like this privilege, but I live alone. I keep my phone in my kitchen charging so that when it goes off, I have to get my ass out of bed, go turn off the alarm. And then at that point, I'm already halfway to the bathroom. So I just go to the bathroom, flip on the lights, get some bright light in my eyes, go to the bathroom, and then I put on my shoes and just go for a straight walk outside. Then I'm walking, I'm alone with my thoughts. That's super important too, is be alone with your thoughts in silence. Don't take your phone with you and like let's do a podcast or music. Just be alone. Think about like gratitudes in life. For myself, I like to pray, but do whatever you feel best. Just be alone with your thoughts in silence. Then,
which can be terrifying to some people, right? That's why they doom scroll.
Yeah. I know I've been sitting with my thoughts more recently, and it's made a huge like just strive forward on. I mean, I would, like the whole depressive thing, like coming from like just not being able to do enough, and just helping me get more done throughout the day. Because the way I think is like, I get dopamine, obviously stimulation is from like just feeling good from doing the things that propel me forward in my business, propel me forward in my bodybuilding journey, and just being alone with my thoughts and stop spending so much time just on my phone right away in the morning it's definitely helped a lot.
Yeah. And at night too.
Yeah.
Like having some kind of, you can start small even. Like if you're someone that wakes up and you just doom scroll for like 2 hours, like, well, no fucking shit, you're depressed. You know what I mean? So it's like maybe make like something even just simple, like no phone for 20 minutes. And then maybe once you do that, no phone for even like 10 minutes, just something that it's not right away, and then build it up. And then I think like an hour is pretty much like the max I really like to go, because I have shit I have to do on my phone. But like an hour is a good amount of time where it's like, all right, I've taken time to make time for myself, like clean up my environment, get some activity in, and then you can start addressing problems in the like outside world. And I think your stress, anxiety, depression will all benefit greatly from it. The same thing before bed. I actually read a statistic: 5 minutes of screen time before bed impacts your REM sleep by 30%.
That's pretty wild.
Pretty damn wild. 5 minutes. Most people are like an hour. And it's like part of like your depression is like you just aren't sleeping. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's like,
that's getting into like taking care of yourself, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, unfortunately, depression, one of the symptoms is insomnia. And so the person who's stuck there laying in bed who goes, well, what else am I going to do besides doom scroll TikTok? Download the Kindle app. Find a book to read if you're stuck in bed and you can't fall asleep. Like there are small things you can do. Like you said, get into this new groove and routine. Understand you do have options for when you're approached with these situations.
Yeah. Well, this is awesome. I think we touched on a lot of awesome subjects. We were going to wrap it up like almost 30 minutes ago. But
Yeah.
we
I think
talked-
it's good that we kept going because
Yeah.
Absolutely.
we
Yeah.
talked about a lot of really good stuff. We really pretty much touched on everything I wanted to talk about, which is awesome. So I love this episode. I think I plan to do another one of these in the future for women's mental health because, obviously that's just as important as men's mental health. And I just want to say thank you, Nathaniel, for taking the time to hop on here, share your knowledge with us. You too, Will.
Yeah.
But you guys can find my Instagram at Trist_Nelson. You can find Will at, if you want to share it, Will.
Will.Hardy1.
If you want to subscribe to Nathaniel, he's not really
You can find me on LinkedIn.
or maybe work with him. I don't know if that or not, but yeah, thanks again, guys, for hopping on, and we'll see you in the next one. I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you later. Peace out, guys.
Peace.
Later.
Oh, shit. I'm still here. I'll stop the recording, but I'll trim this out.